Notice that this meeting was provided on January 4th, 2019 by sending written notice and electronic notice to the Courier News and the Newark Star Ledger, posting on the website and the bulletin board in the municipal building, and filing with the township clerk. Roll call, please.
Councilman Cardillo?
Here.
Councilman Pedrosa?
Here.
Councilwoman Rose? Here. Councilman Nogales?
Here.
Council President Mensch?
Here. Please join me in a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we have minutes for approval, February 4th, 2019.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay. Township Council reports. Councilman Cardillo.
I'd like to report that on February 10th, I attended the, forgive me for my pronunciation of the school name, the Schwa Chinese School New Year celebration. It was quite an event. I was very pleased to attend, to enjoy the culture of music and family for the Chinese community. Also, I took the opportunity on February 19th to get out and vote for the fire district elections, and everything went well as far as I know.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Rose?
Yes, I would just like to report that, like you and the mayor, we all reported to the Martinsville Fire Department and voted in Fire District 1's election. We were 3 of 55 who voted in person on that Saturday. I'm pleased to report that the budget passed, and the 2 candidates who were running for commissioner ran unopposed, so they were reelected. That's all I have.
Thank you. How many votes did you say?
55 in-person votes. I'm not quite sure how many absentee votes.
Yeah, I was curious to see how that impacted.
I'll let you know, because Bill gave me the information. I just didn't bring it with me.
Curious. Okay, thank you. Councilman Nogales.
Thank you. Congratulations to Council President Mensch, who was unanimously selected by the Bridgewater Republican Municipal Committee to be the Republican candidate for the mayor in the fall election. Attended the Zinberger grand opening at their newest location at 550 Somerset Corporate Drive. It is attached to the hotel, which is still under construction. For those not familiar with Zinberger name, it is somewhat of a sports bar and a hamburger establishment. I attended the Valentine's breakfast sponsored by the Somerset Vocational and Technical High School culinary department. It was a fun time. Plan to attend the Somerset County Employee Legislative Committee, which is also known as ELC, meeting tomorrow, where Freeholder Brian Levine is the featured speaker. There are no pending cases before the planning board, so the Monday meeting is canceled. If I repeat that for anybody who's interested, the February 25th planning board meeting is canceled due to lack of cases. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Pedrosa.
I would just like to share in Councilman Nogales' congratulations to Council President Matthew Mensch for getting the unanimous endorsement of the Bridgewater Republican Municipal Organization to be our next mayor of Bridgewater Township. Congratulations.
Okay. The only report that I have this evening, well, I should say 2 things to report. I'm continuing to try to get dates to sit and talk with the folks from the Board of Ed regarding the pilot resolution. I reached out to Superintendent again. I have not heard back yet, but I'll certainly keep everybody posted on that. The only other issue I wanted to bring to the council's attention, this is a follow-up from the last meeting. I've been working with the residents on Washington Valley Road with their concerns over the county taking an easement which is significantly greater than the residents understood that easement to be along Washington Valley Road in their road widening project there. There's still not any definite resolutions. I asked the county to come to the meeting tonight, or to a meeting at their convenience, so that they could brief the council on the issue and we could hear directly from them. They've declined to do that. Mayor, I understand that you've been working with Freeholder Gallagher. Have you been able to reach any resolution to this?
That's correct. I have been working with the freeholder on behalf of the residents there. They are in discussion, but right now it is a county matter. They feel they have the documentation, and it is a county matter with those particular residents.
Yeah, I guess the question I have is, Mayor, have you taken a position with regard to the county over the residents' claims?
Right now, it's a legal dispute about who has the right to that material, and right now, it's like I said, it's a legal dispute. I have no opinion in the legality of their claims.
Okay.
Do you?
Excuse me?
Do you have a position?
I do have an opinion, and I don't think that the county should be taking the land of residents, which, based on the information I've seen, does not look like it supports the county's claims. So I think that the county, before they make those assertions, that they should prove their case definitively to the residents. I think that when you start talking about taking land from residents, that it's a significant issue, and that our local government should stand up on behalf of the residents and advocate for them. That's exactly.
Well, I think, Councilman, I think, of course, if they have no claim, they shouldn't be able to do it. Right now, it's a right-of-way issue, and the county feels they have a legal claim. The residents feel they have a legal claim. They have contradictory documents. That is what the courts seem to be for. I don't know if, I'm certainly not qualified to judge the validity of a claim, and there are mechanisms for it, and that is what they are doing.
Understood. Mayor, do you have a report?
Yes, I do. I just want to mention that we celebrated, of course, the community and the world celebrated Lunar New Year since we met last, and we are fortunate to have 4 Chinese cultural schools in our town offering language and other lessons for the general public. I had the opportunity to attend several of their Chinese New Year celebrations, along with members of the consulate from New York. Thank you. That's it.
Okay, we have no presentations this evening, no discussions this evening. Moving to item 9, meeting opens to the public. Members of the public wishing to address the council on any matter will be allowed 2 minutes to speak unless there are unusual circumstances. Do we have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Council President, before you start, we have a student here with us this evening from Rutgers University. Come on up. Who would like to make a request of us once he tells us exactly why he's here and et cetera. So, give your name. Yep.
Hi guys, my name is Frederick Stevens. I go to Rutgers University, and for one of my classes, my public policy class, I have this requirement that I have to go to any government policy meeting and take detailed notes. And I just wanted to know if I could record this meeting so that I can, take notes later a little bit more detailed.
That's not a problem, and if you have trouble hearing, this is all recorded up here as well. You can get a copy from the clerk, depending on the quality of your recording.
Perfect. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, any member of the public wishing to come forward? 2 minutes, speak unless there are unusual circumstances. Seeing, okay. It's okay. No, that's all right.
So I just have 2 things.
Say your name and your address for the record, please.
Ruth Rochelle, 134 Warren Avenue. I'm here to speak about the ordinance amending Chapter 206, Article 14, Section 206-29 regarding the no parking ordinance on Warren, Orchard, North End, and Marlin Street. First, as you're aware, we brought this issue to the town in July and subsequently the council back in November, having exhausted options with our neighbors, our neighbor that was using the street for primary parking, thus creating a difficult, in some cases, hazardous situation. After moving the ordinance forward for a vote and then finally a unanimous vote, it was approved. At the December 17th meeting, when some of our neighbors affected directly or indirectly complained, some members of the council appeared to be surprised as though that they did not have the facts. I feel it's necessary to clarify this. My husband and I gave everyone the option to review pictures, messages, ask questions at both of the prior meetings. However, questions were very limited, and the ordinance went through with a unanimous vote, as you know. As you know, it was never our intention to have the entire area no parking, but this was the only option we were given at the time. And since the ordinance was approved, the neighbor has been using their driveway for primary parking and only the streets for true overflow, and we do appreciate this. But we do feel that it's come as a result of the ordinance and the attention that it's drawn to the situation. We're very thankful to both Mr. Naples and Councilwoman Rose for putting together a meeting to try to work out a better resolution to this problem. I'm sure they had much better things to do on a Wednesday night than to spend it with us. But they truly showed us that the town does care about its residents. We believe both options presented would potentially alleviate the situation. However, we know this will take some time for a final decision to be made and put in place. You'll be voting later this evening, just in a couple of minutes probably, to rescind the ordinance, which is likely to be rescinded. If it is rescinded tonight, we do have a concern that things will go back to the way they were until a final decision of fixing the situation happens. If that happens, we'll be back at square one, and this time the situation will be worse because, as you can imagine, the road conditions have just deteriorated significantly, even from our meeting with all the salting, et cetera, making it even more difficult to drive through, even without any cars on the street. So ultimately, the cooperation and consideration of our neighbor is the only solution, and I'm just here to say, I can assure you, if it doesn't happen, we're going to be here again, and we don't want it. We really want to come to a resolution on this, so we appreciate that. Second thing I'd just like to say, because, you know, I really haven't attended a lot of town council meetings, and this has really been a kind of an eye-opener, and I love it. It's very interesting to hear what's going on in the town, but I was so disappointed to, having attended these meetings, that when Police Chief Nicoretta was here asking for 12 additional officers, it just kind of seemed obvious to me. 6 of them would be hired and trained in 2019, and it wasn't approved, and I know you're looking at potentially 2. And while I understand and appreciate that your jobs are to be fiscally responsible for the residents, our safety is just as important. I can work a 12-hour day, but I'm not saving lives. I want to know that the police department that works for us and put their lives on the line every single day are at their very best. He presented good reasons for needing additional officers. He's the chief for a reason. He's the expert. But even with that, he also presented a good option that if the consultant that we were going to hire had found that the additional officers weren't needed, he would have the choice of not replacing some of the officers that are up for retirement in 2020. So I'm just curious why this couldn't happen concurrently, that 6 officers get into the mix, get into the academy, the consultant is doing their job, figuring out whether we actually need 6 or we need 2 or we need 12. But I don't understand why it can't happen concurrently, even if there is a short-term expense, albeit that could be fixed again when the retirees would not be replaced. My experience being in the business world is that consultants are very expensive, and usually they don't. They look to cut costs and not really improve a situation. So I would ask again that you revisit this, because I think our safety is much more important than maybe it's not a couple $100,000, but I think he had a very good short-term fix. So just my opinion.
Thank you. Just state your name and address for the record, sir.
Scott Hobbs, 20 Deer Run Drive, Bridgewater. Going to echo her thoughts on the amendment that's coming. As a retired police officer, I can speak, and now I can speak freely, of the need for the officers. I was hired in 1992, and our personnel then was around 80 officers. Since that time, the FBI statistics had said that we should be between 100 and 110. Close to 2000, then Chief Obel, in whatever reasons he was doing it, conducted a survey with a consultant, Mayo and Mayo Associates, that said that we could survive with 75 officers, also saying that with those 75 officers, there would have to be lieutenants on each shift around the clock. We know that the lieutenants aren't working 24 hours. They only work 2 shifts. And we also know that a consultant is going to say basically what you want them to say. They're looking at it, and I've seen it with other consultants. She can probably echo what I'm saying, that a consultant is a person trying to make some money, so they're trying to do what you're paying them to do. Since I was hired in 1992, we have not increased our minimum staffing requirements for the police department. I can't go into what those minimum staffings are. You can talk to the chief about that in private meetings. Because of public safety issues, I will not discuss what our minimum standards are. But with those standards being set from 1990, since 1992, we can talk about the development that's happened in the township. We've had the town center. We've had the promenade. We've had the village. We've had the Chimney Rock Shopping Plaza. We've had the Patriot Stadium. We've had the Marriott and the office buildings that go there. We have the office complex on Commons Way. We have 55 Corporate Drive. We have developments of homes in the West End. When I started, Vanderveer Road was still one lane. Ionis Greenhouse was still there. It was not the same area as it is now. Milltown Road in the area of Glenbrook was all farmland. That's all developed now, which increased having to have a need for a school. Also, we've had the Hindu temple that was built, which is a regional temple. So whenever there is a large-scale event there, there's a traffic impact. Our officers have to go and be there for the safety and for the traffic concerns that are issued, the accidents and so on. And on big days, there's accidents. Like yesterday, I'm sure you had a ton of accidents yesterday. Fortunately for the township, there was a double day yesterday. So you didn't see the full impact of that. So with being said, with the minimum staffings having not been increased, your overtime budget they're going to show it hasn't increased, well, because we have minimums that haven't reflected the reality of what's going on out there. At times, due to call volume, there's only one officer covering the entire 36 square mile town. And that's more than just a very few times, it's oftentimes. There's only one officer. Also, due to not increasing the staffing of the police department, you've had programs eliminated or programs that haven't been able to grow. Perfect example is our DARE program. As a former DARE officer, we had to cut the program because we have to put those officers someplace else to cover the township, which is the first priority. We haven't been able to increase our traffic safety unit because of those staffing numbers. So therefore, you're not going to get to proactive policing. I've heard it mentioned that previous chiefs have said, well, we don't need officers. Some of those chiefs, if you really look at it, had ulterior motives. I mean, we talked about Chief Obel. Those that were here know what his plan was and why he did what he did. When we went to county dispatch, Councilman Pedrosa asked then chief, could they handle it? He sat here and hemmed and hawed, and oh, they said they can do it. Well, 6 months after he retired, he had a county job. So what are those motives? Are they going to tell you that we need officers? You have a chief now that is telling you that we need police officers. As a supervisor, I knew what it was like to have only one officer on the road covering the entire township. I knew what it was like to have 3 officers in headquarters covering calls, taking care of calls. Our calls for service, you can give me all the statistics and all the records that you want, but there are certain calls that are not reported in the UCR, such as domestic violence calls. Those are not going to be reported in your UCR. Also, certain calls take more time and officers. Once again, going back to a domestic violence call, that's a minimum of 2 officers, and it's multiple hours, especially if you start getting restraining orders, weapon seizures, charges, child custody issues. Those are all take hours to do because all the weapons have to be logged in, they have to be documented. All the stores that I mentioned with the shopping, it's been an increase in shoplifting calls. Once again, those calls take 2 officers. Those calls take multiple hours to do those calls because of the fact that you have to log in the evidence. So if you have a case at the mall where they've shoplifted at 6 stores, you've got 6 victims, you've got all of those items that have to be logged into evidence. Especially if you also have, then you're going to have counterfeit credit cards that might be involved with that. There's just a variety of things that go on with the calls that you're not seeing in a stat that says shoplifting, 2 hours. Well, that's 2 officers at 2 hours. Throw in other things, now you're having down to 1 officer covering the town.
Sir, I'm going to ask you to try to wrap it up. I've let you go a little bit longer out of respect for the fact that you've been an officer for so long, and this is a topic of obviously importance to you, and that you have valuable insight to us. But in order to make sure that I want to make sure I'm fair to everybody else who may want to come up and talk about other topics.
I'll wrap it up. I've got two, 3 more points. Going back to those calls, an unintended death. That's, once again, multiple hours. You're going to have 2 officers at the initial, but until that body is released by the medical examiner, which could take us an hour or so to get in touch with the medical examiner, the officer has to stay. We can't just leave a body at the house. So they have to stay at the call. They have to be there for multiple hours until either the medical examiner comes or the funeral home comes. Accidents, that's increased. On a highway like 22, if you have a major accident, you're going to have multiple officers tied up at that accident scene. And that's going to be, once again, could be an hour, could be 2 hours, depending. And then finally, I'll get to the court, and I'll wrap it up at court. I've heard saying our court revenue is down. Well, the police officers aren't responsible for your court revenue. That's not responsible for the budget. That's not their job to go out and be revenue producers for the township. Their job is to go enforce the laws of the township, of the roads, and things like that. The money is a subsidiary of that. But due to the fact that you sometimes only have one officer on the road, he's not going to go out and do proactive policing. He's not going to go out and look for seatbelts. He's not going to look for cell phones because of the fact that he can't get tied up on something because there's no other officer for the township. And then also, our traffic safety unit, because you haven't increased the traffic safety unit, they're sometimes stuck covering calls because as a supervisor, I have to pull officers from somewhere, so I'm going to pull them from traffic safety. So I hope you reconsider it. Like she said, to bring a consultant in, he's going to take months. You're going to be further and further down. You're just kicking the can down the street. I think you really need to look at the reality of where have we been since 1992, where are we at now, and what has the township done, and that you haven't reflected that with the size of the police department.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one question for Officer Hobbs.
Yes.
The study that you referenced, I think it was the 2000, do you have a copy of that study?
I don't have a copy of it.
You know who does? Because the chief doesn't. He has a copy of the executive summary, but I was asking for that, and I can't find anybody who's got it. So if you have it, can you get it to us, please?
I don't have it. I know that I worked with him because I was the school resource officer, and my position was kind of based on some of the things from that study, and I had to work with him, but I never got a copy of the report. I mean, call Chief Obel. I don't know what happened to that report, but I mean, I know what it said. But okay.
Thank you. Any member of the public wishing to come forward? Once, going twice?
Close public input.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, moving on, item 10A, an ordinance amending Chapter 126 entitled Land Use to create a new Part 15 entitled Redeveloper Agreements, Article 51 entitled Contribution to Election Campaigns. Motion to go to public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any member of the public wishing to come forward and speak about this item? Seeing none, motion to close public hearing?
Final action.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to close and move for final action. Okay, roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cardillo?
Yes.
Councilman Pedroso?
Yes.
Councilwoman Rose?
Yes.
Councilman Nogales?
Yes.
Council President Mensch?
Yes. Okay. Item 10B, an ordinance amending Chapter 4, Administrative Organization, Article 14, entitled Department of Police, Section 484D, Composition and Organization of the Police Force, modifying the number of police officers to allow employment of 2 additional police officers. Motion to open to the public on 10B.
Council President, before we open, may I say something?
Sure.
Thank you. As a councilwoman who believes strongly that the safety of our residents, police officers, and all the other people who travel through our borders is paramount, I believe that we have an obligation to provide our residents with an exemplar police department. Chief Nicoretta provided us with the opportunity to do just that, and I am troubled by the fact that this council chose not to hear and fully comprehend the current situation with the township's law enforcement department. I heard quite clearly the township's police chief recommend the addition of 6 officers this year. Chief Nicoretta is the person we entrusted when we approved his promotion to chief to keep our township, its residents and visitors safe, and he told us that he needs 6 officers hired in 2019 in order to meet his mandate. I believe that the council's action with this ordinance for the addition of only 2 new officers to the police table of organization and the adoption of the resolution at our last meeting to hire a consultant to recommend how our police department should be staffed sends a clear message of no confidence in Chief Nicoretta and his two captains. Some may argue that is not, but the actions, in my opinion, speak louder than words. In my opinion, we have the opportunity to rectify the situation tonight, and I move that the ordinance before us be amended to hire the 6 officers that were requested by our chief law enforcement officer.
I would second that.
Any discussion on the motion to amend the ordinance? Hearing none. Motion on, roll call vote on the motion to amend. We don't have public input on motions to,
If the motion carries, the hearing will be adjourned because
Right.
it'll have to be renoticed an additional public hearing.
right. We could not, if this motion was granted, we could not act for final action tonight. It would have to be
Oh.
recarried.
Council President, can I make a comment? Then, am I able to make?
No,
my-
Mayor, we have a motion and a second, and we are going to have a vote now.
Councilman Cardillo?
Okay, may I ask a question? Just to be clear, which way we're voting?
Right now, you were voting on whether or not you want to increase, do you want to amend the ordinance to hire 6 officers?
All right.
That is your vote right now, to amend it.
Please forgive me for asking
All
for
right. We
clarification,
want to make sure we get the,
but sometimes you know how things go.
I hear you.
I would support the motion to amend it from 2 to 6 officers.
Councilman Pedroso?
No.
Councilwoman Rose?
Yes.
Councilman Nogales?
No.
Council President Mensch?
No. Okay, we have a motion to go to the public on, public hearing on this ordinance.
Second?
Have it first? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any member of the public wishing to speak about this ordinance? Okay. It will be reflected for the purpose, we understand that you were speaking about that ordinance in the public session, and certainly we'll consider those. Okay, motion to close public hearing. We have a second? Okay, how are your motions to close and for final action? Okay, we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay. Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cardillo?
No.
Councilman Pedroso?
Yeah, I have a couple of just brief statements. First of all, I want you all to know sincerely that there's nothing more important to me than the safety of the residents and the police officers at Bridgewater Township. And that's our paramount responsibility as government, is to assure the safety of our residents. However, making hiring decisions of 6, potentially 12 police officers as recommended by the chief comes at great expense to the township. This is a decision that I have considered and have thought about to a great extent over a couple months. Let me tell you, I guess, a little bit about why I'm a little bit troubled. The fact of the matter is that I don't know if we need 2 or 4 or 6 or 12 or 20. I just don't have the data to support any given number. And to come forward and spend your money, right, your taxpayer money, on hiring police officers. 12 police officers, by the way, come at a cost of about $1.6 million the first year alone. And those costs only multiply year after year because those officers have to get raises, as they rightly deserve. They have benefits and other things that add to expenses. So my obligation sitting here representing the public is to make a decision that best serves the public, right? So number one, coming into this with the fact that public safety is number one, then we have to come down to the question, how many officers, if any, we need? And for that, we need to look at data, because we can't make a responsible decision spending your money without having the data and understanding the facts. So the chief presented us some data, and frankly, the data I found to have a substantial number of questions. One of his, in his presentation, one of the pages he presented to us was key statistics, and he basically drew a straight line from 2005 to 2017, a straight line, showing an increase of population and an increase for calls for service. But that line isn't accurate. Although our population has increased, actually, one can't argue with that, from 2005 to 2017, our call for services have not been a linear increase. In fact, our calls for services in Bridgewater Township have, for the last couple of years, decreased, right? So if you look at 2017, our calls for services were about 42,500. 2016, our calls for services were 45,700. Our calls for services in 2015 was 46,600 and change, and so forth, right? So this chart is inaccurate because the calls for services have not gone up. In fact, other data shows that the workload in the police department is questionably less, not greater. The Part 1 matters in Bridgewater Township have decreased from 2013 to 2017. In 2013, there were 670. In 2014, there were the same 670. In 2015, they went to 551. In 2016, they went to 549. In 2017, they went to 481. That's a decrease in the Part 1 matters before Bridgewater Township. But that data, that decrease in the police activity is fairly consistent across the board, right? So now, I don't want to go just by that data, right? Because the data is showing that we have a decrease of calls in our police department. And then I hear, like Officer Hobbs and the chief say, well, some of these, these calls for services are taking more time. And so I respect that decision. And so I'm obviously keeping an open mind. I'd like to know what exactly is the number of police officers that we need. The chief also came before us at the last meeting and referenced the same report that Officer Hobbs referenced, 2000 report, where it is alleged that at that time, Bridgewater Police needed 100 police officers. The chief stated that here on the record, that that's his opinion, that report existed, and that the report said that we needed 100 police officers. Officer Hobbs quoted that same mysterious report. And I call it mysterious because the report, as far as I'm concerned, doesn't show that. We were provided an executive summary of that report, which makes no reference to the township needing 100 police officers in the year 2000. My point is that we have a lot of questions, and we have very little reliable answers. I can't sit here and spend your money. I'm not going to spend $1.6 million of your money that comes out of your pocket without having all the data. And I want to know exactly how many police officers we need. And so all we're asking for, all we're doing here today, we're not telling you that we're not going to hire 6 police officers. We're telling you that we're going to find out what that number is. We're going to get a report done. We're going to hire a consultant. With all due respect, Officer Hobbs, he's not going to say whatever I want to hear, because I hope he does, actually, because I want to hear the truth. I want to hear what that number really is. And so when the consultant is hired, right, and in business, I'm in business, I'm self-employed, I hire people, I hire consultants, and I hire them to tell me the truth. That's why I hire a consultant. I don't hire them to come in here and give me some BS answer that doesn't help me get to the bottom of what I need to know. Otherwise, I wouldn't hire a consultant. And I realize that sometimes in court, oftentimes lawyers, and I was a lawyer for 20 years, will hire an expert, and they'll try to get that expert to say what they want to say. And I understand that concern. But that's not the case here. We're not hiring an expert for legal proceeding to say what we want to hear. Because, well, we want to hear the truth. So hopefully the consultant will be hired to tell us the truth. And that consultant will get us to the bottom of this, because we need to know, is there in fact an additional, what is that time period officers are spending on calls? How much more time are they really spending on calls? What is the need for the officers on the road? What should we have? How many officers should we have? And where should they be? And what are the needs for the township? Because that's what responsible people representing you do. They don't just sit here and say, we're going to just blow your taxpayer money, right? And I understand that the mayor has proposed tax increase budgets to this council almost year after year. And I understand that the, excuse me.
Counsel,
let me
it's not
finish.
correct.
You can rebut me. For the most part, the mayor has proposed tax increase budgets to this governing body year after year. And Councilwoman Rose has supported those mayoral tax increase budgets for the most part, and she's been on the record saying that your taxes should go up every year. I disagree. I strongly disagree. I'm not going to overspend your money. I'm going to get to the bottom of it with a responsible thing. It's going to take a couple months, folks. A couple months, you're going to have the right answer. We're going to hire the right amount of police officers to keep you safe.
Council President?
That's a yes.
Mr. Mayor, this is a vote. You don't have a say in the vote. So, Councilman Nogales, it's now your vote.
I'd like to make a brief statement. Councilman Credilla and I, as a subset of this subcommittee of this body, met with the chief a number of weeks back, and I had previously given him the 11-page package that he gave to us, which was entitled Public Safety. Had a lot of graphs, had a lot of information, but I was looking for additional details. And he said quite candidly, he said, well, we don't have all the facts. I can tell you from my 29 years of experience that I need 6 officers this year and 12 officers next year. I guess my dilemma was last year there was nothing raised to the level of asking for any officers. So all of a sudden we went from 0 need to 6 to 12, and I need some facts. I need something that proves to me so that when I'm spending your money, I'm making the right decision. And for that reason, I vote yes.
Councilwoman Rose?
Well, we know I'm going to vote no, but whatever. I have to offer something because I need to understand apparently what our new ground rules are. It's starting to feel like to me, that we're going to do the people's work through the lens of a campaign. And I don't
What
think,
I've said has absolutely nothing to do
I know
with a
that.
campaign for anything.
He sat back. I was looking at Philippe.
I just said the truth. I just said the truth.
Excuse me.
Councilman Pedroso, hold on. We're going to
You know,
vote if the, no, Councilman Pedroso, hold on. If the comments relate to the vote, we're going to take this vote. If you have comments on the ordinance, let's make the comments on the ordinance. We are in the middle of a vote.
All right. Council President, I vote no.
Okay.
President Mitch?
Sure. I think that as comments I've made on the record before, I think as a starting position, I think that right now our police officers operate without a contract. We've been telling those officers that we don't have the money to pay them, yet we're turning around and we're hiring or asking to hire up to 12 new officers. I think that we should resolve our contract issue with our police force before we move forward because, one, it's right and it's fair, and two, because it also impacts how much money hiring officers is going to cost us. There's also issues with regard to bringing in a large class of officers and how that's going to impact future contract negotiations. So I think as a starting point, that issue should be a threshold issue before we go out and we hire any large number of officers. I think as a secondary matter, I share some of the concerns echoed before between some of my council colleagues with regard to questions on the data. I've talked to a lot of officers. Every time I see an officer anywhere around town, I stop and I talk to him or her, and I ask them about what's going on in town. I ask them about issues in terms of, how's life as a police officer. I get a lot of feedback from officers. I spend a lot of time talking to them with my kids and on my own. And one thing has been consistent, and I've heard different stories from officers about, the need for more officers. That, as we've said before, and I think everyone here agrees, that the data itself does not show the whole story. I don't think anyone disagrees with that sentiment. I think everyone also agrees with the sentiment that we have not hired officers in a long time. It doesn't take an expert to look at that. And I think that this ordinance reflects some of that in hiring 2 officers right now. Obviously, there's some people on the dais and some people in the audience who may disagree with that as a starting proposition, but the idea here is that we do recognize that more officers are needed. We're willing to take steps immediately now on 2. But that's not foreclosing future officers, whether that be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, or 12 more officers. We get 2 officers now to start that process moving while we move forward on the dual track of getting a consultant. And a consultant is going to help us understand the data, delve deeper into the data so we can understand that. And the fact of the matter is that the data that has been presented, as Councilman Pedroso pointed out, doesn't, on the surface, support 12 more officers. It doesn't. You need to look to the other facts that we've heard from Officer Hobbs, to other officers who have spoken before at other meetings. And so it's a combination of that. We've heard accusations about, well, we don't trust Chief Nicoretta or something like that. Well, first of all, I've said this before in other contexts, I don't defer my decision-making to anybody. We are all the ones up here elected. No department head, including the chief, is elected to make the decisions for the people. We take input, we take advice, we take guidance, and then we make, ultimately, the decisions. Here, there's enough questions, and I think Officer Hobbs in his comments kind of pointed out one of those facts, which is we've had other chiefs up here, and now we can question other chiefs, and they're not here now, and what they've stated and what they've said and what they've done, but that's part of the problem. So what some people are advocating is don't listen to the former chiefs who said we didn't need officers, but listen to this one because this one's right. Well, maybe it's the other way around. I don't know. That's part of the issue. I think that we've also talked about, we've heard from the chief and from other folks who have testified, who have come up in front of us and talked about issues with regard to the timing to do reports. That, going into county dispatch adds time to calls. It slows down service. Well, I don't know the answer to this question, but one of the things I would ask the consultant to look at is, are there other things that we can do, efficiencies within the department, that can address some of those that may not be hiring an officer? We might be able to hire more officers, but less than 12, and still be more efficient. The other issue is that, and the chief and I disagree on this, but I've heard from other departments and officers in our department about their desire to go to a different alternative scheduling standpoint. Now, there's pros and cons to it. I understand that. But when we talk about a cost of 12 officers to about 1.6 million, maybe more, I'd want to make sure that we really vetted whether there's changes that can be made to the scheduling. Maybe it's not the Pittman schedule. Maybe it's something, a hybrid of it. I called probably 25 different departments of approximately the same size as Bridgewater. I just cold called them and asked them what kind of scheduling they use. And there was a variety. Some people used a Pittman schedule. I don't believe almost anybody used the schedule we had, although I won't swear to that. But there's all kinds of hybrids of scheduling. And some of that scheduling may help alleviate some of the stress, because as Officer Hobbs pointed out, we have a double day. So every officer works on one day of the week. That's not overly efficient when it comes to spreading out your time on the road. It may serve other purposes, training or administrative work, things like that, but there may be alternatives here. So I think that what we have right now is the most responsible step we can take to move forward with both the financial concerns of the cost of the officers, providing more officers on here, and if we do need 12 officers and that report comes back and says that, and we will then be back up here in July or August or whenever the report comes back, and we'll have that discussion. We'll review the report with the public, and we'll make whatever steps, and I'm pretty confident that this council is going to take whatever steps it believes is necessary to provide the resources that we need. And, when Chief was here, he commented about the fact that they started looking about this in April. So it took the chief 6 months to bring this proposal before us. So the council's now had it for 3 months. We weren't brought in on that discussion previously, so all the analyzation that went in, the council wasn't included on. We were asked to come in here and rubber stamp it, and this council, if anything else, is not a rubber stamp. And if we do need 12 officers, well, I can't explain why, after 7 years as mayor, we're only hearing about this now. That's maybe different chiefs, but they're still the same mayor. So this is a planning issue, and I think right now that this council's steps is to plan for the future. If we need 12 officers, and this report confirms we need 12 officers, then we will put in place the right plan to make sure that over the future we have the right number of officers to protect Bridgewater. I vote yes. Item 10C, an ordinance amending Chapter 206, Vehicles and Traffic, Article 14, Schedule, Section 206 to 29, entitled Schedule 1, No Parking on the Municipal Code of the Township of Bridgewater, so as to permit parking along either side of Marlin Street entire length and Warren Street, Orchard Street to North End. Motion open to the public.
Motion open.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any member of the public wishing to come forward on 10C? Oh, we already had Mrs. Rochelle come forward. Motion to close?
Motion to close, move for final action.
Second.
10C.
Council President, if we could let Mr. Naples just...
Oh, sure.
Yes, thank you, Councilwoman Rose. I'd just like to update the council, and I would also like to thank the members of Marlin and Warren Street who've come out tonight. We did meet on February 6th. We did have a very productive meeting. We talked about several issues that I hope will solve the problem permanently. I did send the engineer out to look at those issues. They do involve piping the driveway drainage ditch in front of the Rochelle's house, and then also addressing some drainage issues further down on Warren Street where the road is icing from a sump pump issue. So we did look at that. There is a cost tag to it, but we do have the funds available to do that. I have the engineer's estimate to do that, so the work will commence hopefully as soon as the weather breaks. Again, I want to thank the residents. They were very cooperative. You know, for the most part, I think everybody in the neighborhood gets it. I certainly understand the Rochelle's concern because the ordinance hanging over them they are impacted the most, and they were very clear in showing that. But I think that the other residents realize what their concern is. They all hope that it does not revert back before we can make the necessary improvements that I think hopefully will end the concern forever. If it does not, we'll be back. You know, and if the Rochelle's are impacted and they're unable to get out of their driveway, or if the other neighbors are impacted, you know, then we'll be back. And we'll tell you that those steps did not work, and we recommend other measures, you know, so that they are not permanently impacted. But we do have a plan. I did respond to all the residents who came out that night. I sent them the plan, sent them what we're going to do. I did follow up on that action. The engineer has gone out. He has given me a cost estimate, so we're going to start that work as soon as the weather permits. And I hope it helps.
Okay, we have a motion for final action.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cardillo?
Before I vote, I'd like to thank Councilwoman Rose for her work in bringing this resolution to this change to the table today. So I vote yes.
Councilman Pedroso?
Yes.
Councilwoman Rose?
Yes, and special thank you to Keith Corson, who was his creative solution that we all came to understand was probably the best route to take at this point, and I vote yes.
Vice President Nogales?
Yes.
President Mensch?
Yes, and thank you to all the residents I know who've come out for this issue. It may not have gone as smoothly as Mrs. Rochelle pointed out, but it did bring attention to the issue, and hopefully we'll get to a solution. So thank you all for your time on that. Ordinance 11A, introduction, and ordinance amending Chapter 126 Land Use, Article 45, Supplemental Regulations Governing Certain Uses, Section 126-335, entitled Renewable Energy Facilities of the Municipal Code of the Township of Bridgewater, so as to permit renewable energy facilities on detached residential garages. If you'll remember, Mr. Kraut came in front of us back in September. All right, well, government doesn't move that quick. And explained to us an issue with regard to the way our ordinance was written that created an odd situation for him, a resident similarly situated, with regard to an unusual restriction on putting up solar on his detached garage. This is limited. It's a very limited set of circumstances where this would impact folks. But if we all recall, everyone was in agreement with Mr. Kraut on the situation that he presented to us. We had a lot of pictures on the topic, and this is the ordinance that would otherwise fix that to allow for an expansion of solar panels in the limited instances of residential detached garages. Mr. Salvo, is there anything I'm missing on this?
No.
Okay.
Move for introduction, 11A.
Move for introduction.
I'll second it. And
Roll call.
Wait, go ahead.
Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cardillo?
Yes.
Councilman Pedroso?
Yes, and thank you, Mr. Krob, right, for bringing this issue to our attention. But yes.
Councilwoman Rose?
Yes.
Councilman Nogales?
Yes.
President Mensch?
Yes. Okay. Set public hearing.
The public hearing on this ordinance will be set for the 18th day of March 2019. The clerk will post on the bulletin board copies of said ordinance, and this will be forwarded to the Bridgewater Planning Board for their meeting on March 12th to review and prepare a recommendation.
Okay. We have resolutions 12A through 12F. Is there any one that needs to be pulled out?
I'd just like to make a comment on 12B.
12B, sure.
In all my years, I have never seen a $1.4 million contracts be 91 cents apart, way down the list. The closest I've ever seen it. That's it.
All right, well, I guess that's the right price then.
Yeah.
We have a motion on resolutions 12A through F.
Second it.
Second.
Okay, roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cardillo?
Yes.
Councilman Pedroso?
Yes.
Councilwoman Rose?
Yes.
Vice President Nogales?
Yes.
President Mensch?
Yes. Okay, we have closed session contract negotiations?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, at this time, we have a resolution.
We do.
Okay. At this time, be it resolved by the Bridgewater Township Council, this body will now hold a closed meeting to discuss contract negotiations. When and if the matters discussed become public record, this will be made known to the public at that time. The public is excluded from said meeting, and further notice thereof is dispensed with, all in accordance with Sections 8 and 4A of the Open Public Meetings Act. Folks, when we come back out, we are not going to take any other official action other than to gavel the meeting.